Dear Gabriele, dear Corrado, dear friends of the Italian Cultural Institute, many thanks for coming tonight and welcome. Tonight's event, on the occasion of the 9th edition of the Italian Design Day, is the result of a collaboration with the Italian Embassy and the Italian Trade Agency in Vienna. And so, therefore, before moving on and presenting our two guests, I would like to invite the Deputy Head of Mission at the Italian Embassy, Gabriele De Stefano, to join me on stage for a welcome address.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm very glad to be here tonight and welcome you, also on behalf of our ambassador, Giovanni Pugliese, on the occasion of the 9th edition of the Italian Design Day. I wish to thank both the Institute of Culture and the Italian Trade Agency, ICE, for their common effort to organize this event. It's for sure one of the best examples of the activities of our country promotion here in Austria. This year's event ties in with the theme of the upcoming Universal Exposition at Triennale Milano, which will take place from May to September. Try to offer solutions to the following topic: inequalities, how to mind the fractures of humanity. The Italian Design Week is also an opportunity to promote Salone del Mobile, or Milan Design Week, that is the largest furniture trade fair in the world. For your information, Salone del Mobile will be held this year in April. Furthermore, all these initiatives highlight the importance of design as a distinctive element of the Italian identity and economy. Dear guests, Italy has always been a country with few commodities. We have filled this gap with our great ability to transform nature and reality. This happens with our art, with our industry. We are a G7 country and the second manufacturing power in Europe, and also with our design, meant as the concept of or proposal for an object, process, or system. Now I leave the floor to our speakers that will explore the role of architecture and design in reducing the impact of inequalities in everyday life, mainly through projects of urban regenerations and new models of sharing, based on the concept of sustainability as a form of progress, hopefully taking also into account the legacy of Milan World Expo in 2015 with its theme, Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the talk.
Many thanks, Gabriele. As Gabriele said, tonight's event is linked to several initiatives taking place in Italy in the coming months. The Salone del Mobile, the Triennale in Milan, but also 2025 marks the 10th anniversary of the Expo Milan 2015. So, while thinking about tonight's event, we felt that themes such as inequality, energy, and nutrition are quite connected because they could be understood as part of our broader relationship with the planet's resources and their unbalanced distribution. So tonight, we would like to ask questions such as, 10 years on from Expo Milan 2015, how and if we made progress in our use of the planet's resources, and how can architecture and design help us to improve it and find alternative models of sharing? In order to discuss these topics tonight, we have two guests whom I will introduce right now, Francesco Fresa and Michael Obrist. After my introduction, I will hand over to Francesco, who will talk with a presentation for about 30 minutes. This will be followed by a discussion between Francesco and Michael for about 20 minutes, and then we will open it to questions from the audience. At the very end, there will also be refreshments. Francesco Fresa was born in Rome he attended the Faculty of Architecture in Rome at the Technische Universität in Berlin. After several international collaborations in 1996, he founded, together with Herman Fuenmayor, Gino Garbellini, and Monica Tricario, the studio Piuarch, which is based in Milan. Among many other projects, Piuarch made 2 pavilions at Expo Milan 2015, the Caritas and Enel pavilions. In 2013, Piuarch was selected as Italian Architect of the Year by the Italian National Chamber of Architects in collaboration with the Maxi Museum in Rome. And in 2009 and 2012, the studio won the gold medal for Italian architecture, honorable mention, awarded by the Milan Triennale. Michael Obrist, on the other side of the room, was born in Bolzano and is one of the 5 founding partners of Feld 72 Architekten in Vienna and a university professor at TU Wien. Since 2018, he has been professor of housing and design and head of the university's Housing and Design Research Department. He has taught and held visiting professorships at several universities, including the Politecnico di Milano and the University of Arts in Linz. And together with Sabine Pollack and Lorenzo Romito, he is the curator of the Austrian Pavilion at the coming Venice Biennale 2025, the coming Architecture Biennale. The work of Feld 72 in the areas of housing, educational and office buildings, as well as urbanism, has received numerous awards, including a number of Austrian state prizes, the Gold Medal for Italian Architecture, and the Architecture Award of the City of Vienna, and has been presented at several biennales worldwide. Last but not least, I would like to thank all those who made this event possible. Ambassador Giovanni Pugliese and Deputy Ambassador Gabriele De Stefano at the Italian Embassy, Corrado Cipollini, the head of the Italian Trade Agency in Vienna, Peter Zodera at Feld 72, Francesca Zani at Piuarch, the whole staff of the Italian Cultural Institute, and of course, our 2 guests. Thank you very much once again. Enjoy the event, and I will now hand over to Francesco. Thank you.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Mein Name ist Francesco Fresa. Ich möchte diese kleine Einladung auf Deutsch machen, wie Sie gehört haben. Ich habe in Berlin studiert, aber leider seit vielen Jahren habe ich wenige Gelegenheit, auf Deutsch zu reden. Deshalb muss ich jetzt auf Englisch umschalten. Ich könnte, glaube ich, auch diese Vorstellung nicht voll auf Deutsch halten in 30 Minuten. Meistens spreche ich sehr lange. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank the Italian Embassy, the Cultural Institute, Italian Cultural Institute, and ICE for this invitation, and of course Michele Obrist that is here with us tonight. Well, every year the Italian Embassy organize an event in all the major cities, major capital of the world, to celebrate the Italian Design Day. And I had the chance to participate in several editions, but this year the theme is particularly challenging. It's, as you know, Inequalities, Design for a Better Life. And the question is, can design in its broadest sense, and therefore architecture and design and landscape design, be proactive and practice to foster a process of relation and integration rather than separation? What can or must do architecture in design action to address condition of inequalities? Where inequalities, we have to understand inequalities in a very large sense. Economic inequalities, working inequality, education, justice, gender, together with all the conditions which are related to the climate change, access to the service, information, digitalization. But this topic is today very present, and as Nicola Locatelli was mentioning before, we have this year, for example, in Triennale Milano, an event, the opening of the 24th Triennale, that has as a title Inequality, which will be an international platform for discussing on the topics of possible approach and strategies. Salone del Mobile, who's really is an event that involved the whole city for 1 week, and that has a title this year. The title is Connecting Words, where during this week, with events, presentation, and installation, we'll explore how design can play a crucial role in connecting different dimensions. Venice Biennale, which is going to open in May, is dedicated to intelligence, natural, artificial, and collective. This is the title, and it will investigate how different types of intelligence can work together, rethinking our cities, rethinking our built environment. And not finally also the Osaka Expo, which opens in April, titled Design to Future Society for Our Life, where international communities will discuss how design influences our life, looking towards a society that promotes collective well-being. But let's come to our topics, and starting to have a first reflection of inequalities, which is, when we're talking about inequalities, of course we have to deal with an objective situation towards we can only interact politically as a citizen. The first relevant element of inequalities is the economic and financial system that has created a concentration of wealth that in this polarized society. The other important aspect is the tendency of overproduction of goods to feed, let's say, the north part of the world related to the south or to the east, with serious repercussion in terms of sustainability, like energy consumption, disposals on used goods, impact on the environment, social cost, like exploitation of population groups, and then migrations. We are facing the issue of migration, particularly in the spirit linked to the issues that I just have already addressed, with the manifestation of global inequalities as well as political instability and human crisis. And immigration, the biggest part of immigration comes to the cities, and the cities is I have to go back quickly. The cities are an attraction for people. The cities are a place of opportunities, and what is happening in the last century is a gradual growth of a population of the cities, because cities, as I was saying, is a place of great opportunities, access to work, education, health, and service. As you see, considering the growth of the population in the last 200 years, we are now facing a population of almost 10 billion of people, where the urbanization has reached almost 70% of the population, and cities is a place of great opportunities, but at the same time is the theater of the great inequalities. When we are thinking about cities and urban space, architecture must always pays a special attention to the issues of inclusion, safety, sustainability and interaction, of all which always we have to put the people in the center of our discussion. This is the implicit principle of making a good architecture. Good architecture may not be able to solve the issues of inequalities, but for sure, architecture has to confront itself with the issues of creating a better place to live, with a special attention to the integration and of the different part of the society. Therefore, architecture have the responsibility to propose virtuous examples that support decent conditions for everyone, like in the condition of living, working, studying, moving around, using the public spaces. The promoter of the actors of these changes are not the architects, of course, but different subjects, different actors, the public administration, the organization and cooperation organization, spontaneous organization that from bottom up are trying to trigger changes, and of course also private entities. What Shakespeare was saying, a very nice sentence, what is the city but the people? So to discuss these topics from the perspective of our office, I will show some examples of our projects. Architects can only show what they're doing, that have different type of intervention, also private projects. Where we always devoted much attention to the social and, let's say, political implication, developing an attitude and translating function and qualitative aspects according to the theme of inclusion, sustainability, and accessibility. As an office, we always put great attention to the issue of context. Context in a very wide sense. It's not only the physical context, the cultural context, the social context, with the idea that context is always something about relations. Relations between the buildings, relation between buildings and open spaces, relation between landscape, relation between people. So just to speak about these topics, I want to start from our first projects, our first building. We did this project more than 25 years ago. We were a young office. We won this competition for a social housing in Sesto San Giovanni near Milan. Sesto San Giovanni is a heavily industrial city, and our project proposed for a social housing a building that was a little bit at that time not online with the idea of, let's say, a social block. That's why we received also a lot of critics, even from the administration. But our idea was very simple, just to try to define a social housing as a place of a community, where the idea was simply to create a kind of a courtyard which was, and that's why it's the U-shaped building, a courtyard that is open to the landscape, so it's not a closed courtyard, that create connection with also the outside communities. That a courtyard which is in a way a little bit higher than the general landscape, so to create a more intimate space. The idea was also that all the apartments are facing this courtyard, so that all the living room are facing this courtyard, to create a kind of a social condition where there is also the control, like the Italian mamas that are looking from the windows, the children playing in the courtyard. So the idea was to have this space to make it very precious. We proposed to make it with the wood cladding. Of course, everything in a small budget. That brings, as I was saying, a lot of critics. Most of the people from the administration were saying that it was very dangerous to do that. People that are living in this building would have taken the wood panels, making probably tables from it. And also because this was a social housing building dedicated for a very low, let's say, level of people who cannot afford to pay a rent. But for this reason, we try to create this space that we imagine could be really a place where people meeting of different ages, from people, young people, kids playing, older, elderly spending the time. Actually, what happened, with surprise of everyone, and in a way from us too, is that this place became very much alive, and was the whole day long was occupied by people spending the free time. The community was keeping control of what was happening, and nobody touched the wood panels. Nobody thought that they can use it for their purpose, but they prefer to have a nice place, a beautiful place that they enjoyed and appreciate. A project that we are developing right now is something completely different. Is in Firenze, near Firenze, at the edge of the city. Manifattura Tabacchi. We have in every main Italian city these places. They were doing the production of cigarettes, of tobaccos. Of course, they were then giving up. This was a beautiful complex planned by Pierluigi Nervi, engineer, architect, Italian architect, who planned this in the 30s. The whole complex was partly abandoned. This operation is a public-private intervention. The idea was, again, to create a community here, or to enhance the community and connect it to the other part of the city. To create here a new part of city, so introducing new volumes to define this urbanity. One part of this area is open to the landscape, to the public park. It's at the edge of the city, and what we propose, and then together with, of course, with the client, were developed is the idea of creating a mix. So not only different activities, public activities. The place is a public place, is accessible, is a part of the city, with a small part of education, free time, food and beverage, exposition. There is also a small theater, residential building of different types to respond to the requests of residential. We have, let's say, high-end residential building, middle residential building, social housing with a, let's say, mix of transgenerational people, so older people and younger people are living together. Student housing. So the idea was really to create a place, a mix that could be, again, could offer a condition of inclusion and relation with the other communities. A lot of green, a lot of spaces that can be used for co-working and other public activities, open spaces, spaces for public spaces. We have in Italy a long tradition of the creation of public spaces as spaces where people are gathering, people are meeting, people are discussing, as a places of, let's say, democracy, where you really build the democracy. So the mix of the architecture, the mix of the different spaces were really designed it with the intention of overcome all the separation and try to work on again on the idea of inclusion and to create places where the surrounding inequalities might be overcome in a way. This is also interesting project to talk to because it's a research center, medical research center. So very difficult to imagine that to approach the issues of again putting the people together, creating a place of interaction. It's in an area which was the former area that in 2015 hosted the Expo, Milan Expo, which is going to be completely redeveloped. It's more than 1 million square meter new construction, so a real city, a city that hosts not only residential, offices, hospital, medical activities, a part of the University for Medicine of Milan. So an area that will host more than 70,000 people. So again, a condition that is very attractive, but can create also different condition of inequalities. The area is under development, where you have this green square is our building. We had to do a vertical building. The plot was very small, but we always confront ourselves with the idea of the campus. The campus is the place where people really interact. In the campus, the most interesting part are the open space places. On the left, we have the image of Harvard. There is a say in Harvard that the nicer ideas are not happening in the laboratories or in the classrooms, but mostly in the cafes, in the park, where people meet, exchange the ideas, exchange the opinions. So, how to create a vertical campus? Well, simply we started working on our plot and thinking that the vertical connection could be an opportunity to create this interaction. So the whole building is around a vertical connection that goes all up to the 13 floors of the building, reaching a garden on the roof. Along the vertical connection, which is not a stairs, which is not only a stairs, which is not only a corridor, but there are things happening. You have meeting rooms, places to stay, places to make informal meetings. So the vertical connection is really the heart of the place. And the activities of this research center are the laboratories and the offices, which traditionally are occupying different part of the buildings, are in this case put on left and right of the vertical space, also to contaminate, to create interaction between people who are dealing with different things, so to create a life in this building, which is also not arriving until the ground, so the ground is open. The building is permeable. Of course, you have the stairs and the lobbies arriving on the ground floor, but the idea was also to enhance the connection between the other part of this new complex by creating an opening on the ground floor. So, as you see, there is a square. The building is permeable on the ground floor to create this kind of places where people really spending free time and not and also the free time between the working time in this place, while the inside is a big stairs, we can call it, where many things happening. Amphitheater, there is a small amphitheater where you can spend time for lunch or to have a break or have conversation. On one side, the laboratories, the medical researcher. On the other side, people which are working in the office. So the idea was to create a new community, and on the roof it's a big garden, something that we always like in doing in buildings. And again, the garden is a place where people at the end meet and having spending free times. Near Turin, we are now building this cultural hub. It was, again, it's in Venaria, which is just the suburbs of Turin, another industrial city, with a lot of social issues. And especially Venaria is a place that, despite the fact that there is also a palace of the former king of Italy, it's a place that has a lot of problems of integration. So the idea was of the municipality was to create this cultural hub using a former military space. So after the demolishing of the barracks, the idea was again to have a place that is working with open spaces and buildings, so not to create one building but fragmentate the construction in order to give more relevance to the public space, to the open space, introducing different activities, museum, civic school, place, library, place for co-working, and creating through the building always connections, so the building is always permeable, with the idea that this new place will reconnect different parts of the city, attract people, the different communities using these buildings, and especially giving importance to the public spaces. Something completely different, and that goes on the field of fashion company. We had the opportunity to work a lot with the fashion industry, mostly for corporate building. This is a factory for Fendi in Tuscany. So in the Tuscany beautiful landscape. The idea was to create a factory, an excellence for place for good working. But the place was before occupied by a brick factory and also a cave. So when the brick factory and the cave was removed, what was left was a big hole, so a fracture in the nature that was done by the human. So the first point to reconnect this, also these inequalities from our point of view, was to recreate a landscape. So we had a simple idea. The Fendi was expecting a building. This was a competition again. Was expecting a big building, a very representative building. We thought to have just a building, one-floor building that occupies the hole that was created by the spoiling the soil. This building has different courtyards and halls that gives light on the activities inside, and some volumes for common use like cafeteria and other public use, and then covered with again with earth. So to recreate the hill and make in a way the building disappear, still the spaces underneath are full of light with gardens. Courtyards are hosting these gardens, and what we try to create at the end is something that really reconnects nature in the landscape, people with the nature. Let's say the garden on this building, which also has edible gardens and other things, is public, so is open to the community. There's a village here that is using this new garden together with the people working there. As I was saying, somehow unexpected, the working space is full of light, full of nature that is entering in the working space, and again trying to face the issues of good working to create, let's say, a new community that also interacts with the external community. Another completely private buildings, in a way, an office building. So just an example how this thoughts that we have to overcome always the idea of creating places where people can interact and meet. This is the headquarters of Znam. Znam is a big company for distribution of gas, the headquarters with the representative ambition to be this is the tower in the middle, to be a representative building. This is the plot, and what we thought, and the area is very interesting because it's also on the periphery of Milan, really developing very quickly. Prada has built their cultural hub, the Prada Foundation, which is really regenerating the area. So what we thought is, first of all, not to occupy the garden, the entire garden, so to give the open space to the community, and that's why we concentrated the building on a plot, and the open the green space that we were taking out was lifted in the center of the building in order to create a space on the ground floor and a space in the middle of the building, serving places for the different community, the surrounding community and the community that populate this building, that works in this building. Also because we are always looking at the context. I was saying the building started as being a very simple volume, but at one point we thought could be interesting to articulate the building reacting of what was in the neighborhood, trying to reach the height of on the different volumes of the surrounding buildings. Also thinking about the view from the inside, the view to the neighborhood or to the city. So the building is very simple. So offers on the ground floor a garden, a park. The park, the ground floor hosted activities which are open to the public, exhibition center. For also a school. So the ground floor, it's opening a dialogue with the surrounding people, with the community, while in the middle we have this glass house, and this glass house, this is an image of the ground floor. The glass house is hosting all kind of activities which are connecting again the people that are living this building, the cafeteria, places for meeting, again amphitheater. We have simple ideas, but we replicate always these ideas, and it's almost completed. Talking a little bit also of what we do. This is our office in the center of Milan. Our office is this green garden that you see there. It's an office. We are 50 people living there, spending a lot of time there. It's inside the courtyard. The idea was to create an element that can really reconnect not only the community, which is our community inside, but also the surrounding. This was the roof when we enter in this building. It's a two-story building. On the roof, then we proposed to make a garden. We realized a garden. We sponsored this garden. This garden is a place that we use a lot. It's an edible garden. We cultivate tomato and zucchini and other things, and we take it and we cook it. So we cook inside the office. The garden is a place where people are spending time, are having meetings. During COVID, that was an incredible resource. Just eating during lunch break, or just spending some time to smoke a cigarette. But also we do activities with the surrounding. The roof is open for the people who are living in the block. They can use it in the evening for different activities. And also we have next door a school, an elementary school. We invite regularly children of the school to see how things are grown. Most of the children have no idea how things are grown. We are trying to bring again also urban agriculture in the city. One time when children find a, what's the name of the radish, and they say, look, I find a tomato, because he didn't know that tomato is growing on the plant. And also we try to, again, interact a lot with the community. It's an example of bottom-down activities inside our courtyards, but not only inside our courtyards. We started, especially during Furniture Fair, with some workshop where we were questioning how can we improve our neighborhood, where people from the neighbors were coming and bringing ideas, proposing ideas, so a collaborative planning again. And then we started to make projects, pro bono project we are doing in our own, where we were suggesting the cities to regenerate a place without any attraction to a garden or a community center that was closed with walls to open and to create again something that people can use, or just a temporary site before that it's going to build to create a children playground. This is now under construction because we found the money. We found it also inside the neighborhood and with some sponsor. Now is happening. Or just a square in front of our office that was a parking place, and then without changing actually the right of everyone to have a taxi stand or a bike parking, we created a square. Another project that we did with the NGO was in Brazil, in São Paulo. The idea was to make temporary places for interaction. So we developed the system, again looking a lot of the context. The idea was to create something that was very linked to the Brazilian culture. We started from looking at the sidewalks of São Paulo, creating this geometry, and then having also linked to the Brazilian culture with the art, with this more colorful elements. These elements are very flexible. They can be a sitting, they can be a place for playing, they can be a gardening place, and an amphitheater. And then the idea was to bring these temporary places, very simple, very cheap to build it, in part of the cities which are suffering, between buildings or in places that are typical places without quality, or where you have problems of degradation between buildings or in favelas. Also, we started realizing this. I mean, we found sponsor, and the first example is in a school in one of the biggest favelas from São Paulo, Higienópolis, a school complex which had no playing ground. So this little element started to be very attractive for all the children, and of course it was a great satisfaction for us to see that it's working, that to do this is working, is creating again sociality, is confronting ourselves with our little activities that we can do as an architect with the issue of inequalities. Nice, I like to show it, it's always nice. Last project is something that we are doing in Lutsk, in Ukraine. I thought it was also very quite interesting and actual. We had, before the war, a lot of relation with the Ukraine. When the war started, we kept the relation and also try to give support. We are now planning a rehab center in Zhytomyr, which is a city in Ukraine that for veterans. But this project, which is in Lutsk, it's a city in the western part of Ukraine. The city, let's say, the western part of Ukraine is not that affected by the war. Of course, it had damage during the first day of war because it was bombed. Lutsk is a beautiful city that has a historical center, which one you see here on the bottom, which was an incredible reach of interesting building architecture and also a mix of different culture. There are Catholic Church, Lutheran, also, of course also Orthodox, a castle, a convent. One of the most important synagogue of Ukraine. The center was mostly destroyed during the war, and after the war became a place that had no connection with the city, almost abandoned, with a beautiful form, but very much integrated with the green. So together with the municipality, pro bono, we started to work also with local stakeholders to make a master plan with the idea of redeveloping and relaunching this part of the city when the war will finish and there will be new investment, new, let's say, developing. So we work on the master plan, doing our work of architects, but involving the cities. So even during the war, we were several times there, in starting a process of communal planning, involving the communities, the people, the students, to bring ideas, to tell us about this part of the city, how they see it. So that was a very intense and very interesting work that was sometimes interrupted by alarms, bombing alarms, but the people were always very enthusiastic and involved. And after that, we came up with the master plan. The idea of the master plan is again to create a mix of activity, to bring different activities, also sport, tourism, again in the center, which is, as I was saying, abandoned. We are promoting a small competition for Ukrainian architects, students and architects, to rethink these spaces. These are, let's say, the sketches for promoting this competition that we are already starting now, still in this period, to create new places, to redevelop the places which are not, that needs to be reconsidered, and to start also to propose an idea of redeveloping some areas with an architecture which is always careful to the context, being contemporary without being, let's say, nostalgic, but at the end creating a lot of public spaces, places of where people can meet, connecting this areas, also connecting the castle with the old town and with the new town, and basically trying to offer to the people a better place to live. So this is our experience about these topics, and thank you very much for the attention.
Yeah, grazie Francesco, thank you very much. Just a quick check in the audience. Who is from the architecture field? Just to understand the context. Can you just raise up their hands? Okay, that means a third of the audience. I think, though, first of all, compliments about the really fantastic work where you also through your personality there shines this wish to combine the ethics and the aesthetics, but also the spatial configuration, what architecture is always about. And I think it's also important to translate context in a certain way. As we are here guests in an Italian cultural institute, and I think it's also important to relate the Italian context and also to understand it. So architecture has this strange thing that it is always related to power, not in a negative way, but it's related to somebody which has the money to build something. And then this somebody can be something where you know what his agenda is, or it could be process of people, but it is a matter of expression. That makes it also very interesting because it shows what is worth to our society. In an artistic reflection, you can have the singular outsider, which makes a work of art, which after time by art historians is considered as the expression of that time. But architecture has this brutality, but also in a good way, this brutality that it really shows what is worth for us. And I think that's also very interesting. So if we would destroy everything which was built before the 50s, on our planet, so there was this crucial moment when everything what has been built afterwards was more or less the same amount of stones and materiality which was being built before. But if you would erase everything about that, then we look us in our eyes. No? So, and it would not be always a very nice picture what we are facing, but this is us. No? Everything which. So I think most of you are not older than the 1950s. And this is the mirror of that what we are, that what we have decided, that the politicians, the political representation of architecture. And I think that's also interesting. But it's also interesting here that you see a world which is changing and you put a lot of topics which are absolutely relevant for our society itself. And I think that makes these works also standing also very clearly. If we speak about inequality and let's also go into the system, because I think it's important also to reflect on a few issues. You reflected, if you look at Milan and Vienna as two twin cities, and we have the Wiener Schnitzel and the Bistecca Milanese, which are also similar, but they have differences, obviously, and you never should dare to order a Wiener Schnitzel in Milan.
Who invented? That's a big question where it comes from.
Yeah, there's a little difference in that context. But I think what is interesting, also Milan is a city which has a certain kind of radial order, etc. But obviously in the representation of power it's completely different, and the representation of ownership is completely different. And I think that's also interesting, this question of inequality, etc. So Vienna is a city which is based on rent. 77% of the population are renting a space, whereas in Italy and in most of Europe, people are accumulating money to own spaces. And that obviously makes society completely different and makes the moment where we are right now also extremely difficult. It's one of the first time in the history, or in our perceived history, which we know in our lives, that paradoxically, after the crash of the big financial crash, which we had approximately 15 years ago, which was based on an immobilian bubble, on the American housing market and of rents, not of rents, of payments which could never be paid back, the big money invested in big blocks in the city. So it's the first time that a gigantic amount of money flows into the city. And parallel to that, we have the flows of investment, also of middle class, which makes, in Austria would call it Vorsorgewohnungen, which means little homes where you can invest about 50 square meters, where you know if everything goes wrong in your life, at the age of 65, you have a little home where you can stand, you don't have to pay the rent. And parallel to that, through the invention of Airbnb, a new possibility to make money out of the city has emerged and has transformed the city in something absolutely brutal. So most of the people here, maybe they are unaware, but they are very, very lucky to live in a city where, yes, on the private market, the prices became very expensive compared, but it's not comparable to cities like Munich, like Milan, like Rome, like Paris, which for the first time became really unpayable for those who have grown up in their own city. And I think that's also interesting. There was a study of the Politecnico in Milan which calculated two things, which was very important. So that the city of Milan has enough space for all the inhabitants of Milan. You wouldn't have to build something new, it would fit. But paradoxically, we know that everybody goes out of the city for a reason, because nobody has the money to pay to stay in Milan. And with the normal income, with the medium income which you would have, you will be able to buy approximately 20 square meters of real market price in Milan. Just to show how a city which was very comparable to Vienna transformed completely. And that obviously has to do with this transformation. It has to do with the inequalities, that a major part of that, what is considered a citizen is not living in the city anymore and is not living in the centrality of the city. And I think it's also very interesting in these areas which are building, or that there were also peripheral situations, like the big campus of these 70,000 people. So I think these transformations are really important, and it would be interesting. How do you see, how you perceive this kind of transformation in the city itself, and what does it do with a city like Milan, where this kind of inequality and inaccessibility creates these invisible movements of people which have constantly to migrate between, or to oscillate between outside and inside, of students which have even to go from Bergamo to Milan because they are not able to pay the rents anymore.
Well, first of all, you're right. It's very interesting, this comparison between Milan and Vienna, because there are, let's say, middle-sized cities. They are not metropoles, and we know that big cities are really the incubator of inequalities. Somehow, mid-sized cities have this, let's say, more size, this scale that can be an opportunity to create a more equal city. I mean, it's this idea of equality. It's of a good distribution is not because it's driven by a political socialistic vision, but because really it creates a better place to live. But in the same time, there are processes that are driven by different aspects. The economic. Before I try to, I apologize if it was a little bit but I try to go through the drivers of the social, economic, and aspects that create inequalities. We, as an architect, have a position that it's quite, I would say, uncomfortable, because we are, yes, inside this business where not only where private capitals are driving the transformation, and where the other actors, the political, the communal actors, has the function to give the rules for a proper development, which is not always happening. Also because we are in a society that is sometimes eating himself in a way. As you were saying, Milan is, especially for the aspect of living, a very interesting case to study. Milan had faced in the last 10 years a great development. Milan was 20 years ago an industrial city, worker city. All the industries have been closed, placed in other countries. So it became a city of not anymore of production, but services, attracting many new people, so growing again, which didn't happen for many years. Immigration, which is something that it's now a big discussion right now, but we are a society, the Italian but also the Austrian, which demographically is reducing themselves but growing. So the immigration is a resource. Of course, it's creating condition of inequalities, of tension. So we have to work as politically as a citizen, the administration, and finally we as an architect in our action to try to offer solutions for that. But yes, it's an issue because exactly this, the growing, the development of the city, the attracted new capitals, money, finance, especially from abroad, new funds. The funds are interested in a developing, in let's say, in the business. They need that the operation are being profitable very in a quick time, which means that the prices of the housing is growing. In Milan, we face it growing of the costs of almost the double in the last 10 years, which made paradoxically the city that is opening, creating new public spaces, is opening, creating new places for living, but is less accessible, especially for younger people, students which are living outside the city, and this create again a shock because infrastructure are under overused, are not adequate. There is many apartments are empty, but many people are not finding or don't have the access to this housing. So it's kind of creating condition of inequalities that the administration or the political driver should try to harmonize and solve.
In your work, there was a lot of the emergence of a new symbiosis between the architecture and nature. So on one side, in the architecture program itself, and then obviously that's what you have shown us in this tentative of this urban regeneration project, and then also in these kind of social issues related to these. And I think that's also very interesting, so that the visions of a city obviously changed, and it becomes a collective, a new interpretation of that what a territory could be. And I think that's in Milan very evident, because all these gigantic brownfields, which were the former industrial areas, if you look at even Alfa Romeo factories, etc., which were at the beginning outside of the city, then the city was incredibly growing and were eating them more or less. And these created this kind of completely new Milan. And also, obviously it has also to do with a city which is highly ambitious. And I think that's also interesting. It's one of the most self-promoting and self-projecting cities of Italy in that sense. So Milan is always bigger than it is, so in its projection, which makes it also very interesting, that it constantly has a mirror of itself already in the future. And but that's what we see here. I think it's also very interesting in this kind of territorial shift between that what was a center and that what are these new emerging areas, which is much more than based on new neighborhoods. And Milan itself, I think it's also interesting if you compare it to Vienna. So the municipality boundaries of Vienna are its Bundesland boundaries in a certain way. So that means the region of Vienna ends with Vienna. And and if you look at Milan, it's part of a huge region, which is one of the highest producing and richest areas of Europe itself. Also one of the most polluted areas of Europe. But where the political discussion and the territory is seen in its relation. So Milan itself is not very big, but the metropolitan area obviously is gigantic. And the political decisions can be taken in the metropolitan areas, whereas in Vienna, it's a matter of negotiation because the political representation of Vienna is in a political spectrum different than the one surrounding it. And I think, but also speaking of that, what the city was before, and if you would have looked at a lecture 50 years ago of periphery, the nature would not be a fundamental part of it. It would be about city production, and it would be about the cheap production of housing, etc. And I think what we see here is also a major shift. And also the metropolitan area itself, La Città Diffusa, the diffuse city, became a major topic also in this kind of discussion. And I think that what we showed here was also the transformation of streets which bring other players into the game, which is mobility. And how do you see here also the major shifts for the future? Because also mobility is based on money, accessibility, the right. So Henri Lefebvre was speaking about the right to centrality, so that you have the right to be there where things are happening, and they always are related to or the territory, or at least to how can I reach it. What I see in your project is a tentative, and that makes every architecture studio potentially like a Trojan horse strategy, that although you're connected to power, the job and the responsibility as the practitioner is that to change it in such a way that it could relate to ethics in a certain way. How do you see these kind of things in territory and mobility and the return of nature into the city as one of the main topics?
Well, first of all, you're right. We as an architect, we have this duty to try to interpret, to face the condition, and we're facing all the condition, also the condition of inequalities, which is the topics of today, and we have the duty of not trying to solve it, because it's something that it's not, as I was saying, it's other level, but constantly to think how to promote condition of a safer city, more in inclusive city, more a city that creates this mix of people and not ghettos, that is a possibility of integration, opportunity of integration. But there are many things that are working against that. As you were saying, Milan is a interesting example. Milan is, as I was saying, a small city, is 1 million inhabitants, but the surrounding of Milan is very big. It comes to 5 million of people. So transportation, movement of people living in the center, people from the center going outside, trying to find a less polluted or less more green areas, is a flow that in the years have changing the form of the city. And while we have going out, I mean, not taking only Milan as an example, we have the responsibility of trying to reverse this development of the city that has had in the last 56 years, where transportation, private transportation, cars has been taking out public spaces, has been reducing the green spaces. So there is a kind of virtual circle where we have to work on that, on the mobility in a better way, more sustainable, more everything, but also is another mobility is also gives you a different quality of life, and creating more public spaces. I talk a lot about public spaces, but in Italy, I think it's the biggest heritage we have, the public spaces in our oldest cities. It wasn't that the same in the last 50 years. We completely forgot about that. But we have, and that's why we have to go back in this idea of constant connection with the context, whatever it is. As an architect, you have to learn that context is going somewhere else and planning and designing with the idea of the other places.
If we speak, last question before I open up to the public. So right now, in terms of climate change, we have a praxis which is changing rapidly and is questioning itself. So if we are not in a Chinese context where we have this unbelievable growth of our society. We are a shrinking continent. We become the biggest consumer continent. We lose a lot of our strength in terms of innovation. If I look at the whole generation of my students, they would say a lot of the world is already built, and it's time now. How can we reuse that what is here? But obviously, it's not so simple. Obviously, because most of the things which we could reuse are exactly there where people went away. Because there's a reason why we have empty spaces, because we have an economical decline, or we have a kind of an industrial or a cultural shift in the society. So we could obviously make urban mining, transformation, etc. But right now there are a few major shifts also in this political transformation of Europe itself. There is this tentative of creating a law in Europe where it would not forbid, but it would put on the agenda that every building which is there should be evaluated if it could be reused, considered, etc. Obviously, 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it was a completely different question. It was very easy to transform the Colosseum, part of the Colosseum, in houses, because the materiality which were shifting around were just masses of stones, and the connection between the stones was something which was very easy to redefine and to reorganize. So we created a world which was very easy to be sustainable. We had even buildings which are, I mean, if you look at, so if you look at the Famiglia Medici, they wanted just a banal office building, and gave to this banal office building even just the name offices, gli uffici, no? But still they stood for 500 years and became one of the major museums. So the typology of that space, although so banal that you just give it the space, uffici, was so resilient because of its typological strength that it could survive. And if 10 years ago I would have given students a job to make a building which lasts 500 years, they would say you're completely insane. But obviously we have to think about typologies in that way. And right now we have this strange moment where we are surrounded, as what you said before, by objects which were never planned to survive 70 years or 80 years. And they are made with a multiplicity of materials which are so singular that it's also very, very hard to recycle them in a completely different way. And I think this changes also our praxis and how we look at things. So that what was a revolution in the art world, the protection of the good thing, of the valuable thing, the heritage, now becomes the protection of that what is just gray energy. So we protect it, not because it's worse, just because we don't want to put other matter and other energy in the process. And I think that's an interesting shift. If you, as you said, if you studied in Italy, you were surrounded by a prison of non-opportunities, because or you had beni culturali, which destroyed every kind of tentative to move around, or you had an impossibility that certain kinds become solid. And I think now it's very interesting because we have for the first time to look at really non-valuable objects in a vision of possibility of transformation. And most of these objects which we once built are not in the city center, but are somewhere, or we made a multiplicity, as we said, of an in-between city, which looking from above, it's just an island, it's just islands in a gigantic sea of mobility, and we have to deal with that. How does this change the praxis and also your praxis, and how would you see here future difficulties and the future opportunities?
Well, you touch a big topics, which is that architecture, or let's say the construction industry, is affecting the production of CO2. It's more than 40% of the production of CO2 is given by the production of concrete, steel. So the building industry, of also the infrastructure, is affecting a lot the production of CO2, and we have to think every day that our city has to become to keep livable, and so all these issues are very important. How you build, the material that you use, the attention that you use to existing buildings, by not having this culture of demolishing and reconstruction, but reconsidering the reuse of the building, bringing green inside the city, because we all know that a green street, a green park is reducing the temperature on the side, so it's helping the pollution. On the other side is helping the energy consumption. So it's a virtual circle that we have to embrace. Not all the signals that are coming now in the last years, especially recently from the other part of the ocean, are going in this direction. I think it's a big challenge for Europe now to finally to take a position, to also consider that our cities, full of contradiction, but as a matter of fact, are places that are more inclusive, and our culture, our social system culture, is it's a system that has been trying, and again I'm comparing to other countries of the world, also on the East, that are creating a better society. Now we have really to take position. So I think that the green issue is a very important thing. It's not just a fashionable thing. That's why I was also showing our experiment. We call it experiment on our roof or on our community. There is always a saying that the way you are, the way you eat. I'm saying also you are the way you work. You do something for yourself and for the others. So to bring again green in the cities, because our cities were much more greener. When you see here outside the Ungarngasse, it's a street without trees, with a large car streets. So we have really to. We are rethinking. We are in the process of rethinking our cities on the right way, and that will bring only advantages in terms of livable cities, livable public spaces, reuse of the building for new function, bringing again in many places of the city inhabitants. So creating this mix between work and living, and this is really the future of the city. Somehow we have to look back. You were right thinking we have to look back how social, sustainable were our cities in the past. We have to learn from the past and try to bring again this attitude in our cities.
Are there questions now from the audience? Somebody, there's a question?
Good evening. My name is Matteo Condemi. I'm the sales director of our company Alessi here in Austria. So I think Alessi doesn't need any kind of introduction. I think everybody knows. It's a 100-year-old company. Thanks. Exactly. Working with architects, more than 1,000 architects during the 100 years of his life. And I got quite provocative question to make. Because you spoke about the past, the future, the students, and so on. And in the past, we can see a distinctive presence of world-renowned architects. So we moved from the era from Brunelleschi and Bernini to the so-called modern era of Renzo Piano, Ettore Sozzas, or, for example, Aldo Rossi, which were architects very well known around the world. And today we feel a little bit like the lack of new Italian architects that are world recognized, and we have to fish, for example, from Archive to find out new design, like from Archive from Lissoni, from Mendini, from Patricio Urquiola. And so I would like to know your opinion about this, and where do you think there's the problem? Why we have this lack of new architects getting well known outside of Italy and around the world? Thank you.
Well, first of all, Alessi, which is, I don't have to introduce it, has many international designers, not only Italian designer. It's a good example how you can make quality with craftsmanship, which is in Italy actually. It's a resource. It's I would call it more a culture. Which, because I like this, it's a culture of taking care about things, so doing things in a good way. That's the secret of the Italian craftsmanship. I personally, I don't think so. I don't see this lack of good architects. I would say more. I see the issues that. When you don't have good architecture, the reason is there is a lack of good clients, of good promoters. You can see historically in Spain, after when Franco died, that Spain opened, and there were a lot of entrepreneurs, of clients, of public sector, public and private sector, that were demanding for good projects, and Spain had suddenly a generation of great architects coming up, and this is not only Spain as a good example. So, and when you mention Brunelleschi, or we have to think that at that time the client were the Medici, people with a vision, with the so. In other words, I would say that probably the problem of architecture in Italy, if that is a question, it's the problem of the commissions, of the political aspect of the entrepreneur, and you're touching a point that it's quite painful. Italy, from this point of view, well, we have definitely. An issue with the development to creating, changing the things. Milan is for sure an exception for that. Generally speaking, I feel that we have right now in the world a tendency, I would call it kind of a manierism of the architecture. I don't know if you agree that there is a large architecture production that is more based on the wow effect, on the so-called Dubai effect, to make a twisted building or not straight anymore, rather than looking at other aspects, which are the one that we are talking today, that less formality, but more the approach of trying to interpret the function, giving then offering spaces, offering trying to look in relation between the older building and the new building, so trying to look at the context, things that we have been talking today that are very important. So I think that generally speaking, I see that we are now passing a period of some formalism in architecture, or let's say mostly of the so-called star architects are more formalist, rather than giving attention to the issues that are really the subject of today. Inequalities is very ambitious to start with this title, thanks to the Italian Design Day. But the point is really to bring in on ground and start to think, how can you deal, how can you work, how can you try to interact with the problem that we have in the cities, and to think an architecture which is not only form but substance.
No, I think it's a very interesting question which you pointed out, because you think about it in the question of cultural representation. Obviously, I mean, when Brunelleschi invented the Renaissance, I mean, he made it with a very conceptual building, which was a building for the ones which were excluded from society, you know, the ones which had the, how is it called, the motherless child in a certain way. So it was something very conceptually, and obviously it's related to power and the power of representation. And if you look at the work of your company, if you look at Aldo, for example, I mean, I think it's very interesting because you took a few names where each of them, you could look at them in a way of representation. If you look at the career of Renzo Piano was well known outside of Italy, was never perceived as an Italian architect. He was perceived as the architect together with Rogers of the Centre Pompidou, and he was never perceived by Academia of Italy as an architect. It took very, very long that he became then that and became a senator, etc. The same goes with Aldo Rossi. Aldo Rossi was pushed away 1968 from Politecnico because he was in solidarity with the protesting students of 1968. He had to go to Zurich, and then just because of the poetry of his, approach, that he was able to assimilate something in drawings which then could become object, he could also become a part of a design world. But if I would look at Giancarlo De Carlo's work, which was also a fantastic architect, it's quite impossible to make design objects of his work. Or if you look at Alejandro Aravena, was once invited by Vitra to make a furniture, and he made this fantastic response to a chair which was chairless, which was just this kind of bend, which Indios were using to work in the forest. So I think it's a very complex topic, and it has exactly to do with also the star system itself evolved in a system of absolute money development of eastern part of the world. When Zaha Hadid was making the Pikes Peaks competition for Hong Kong, she was a representative of an upper class of Iraq making that kind of drawings, but nobody could ever think that this could be produced. It took ages of an uprising of certain kind of states with also dubious kind of money, Dubai, that certain kind of architecture was possible. But right now, with the development of artificial intelligence, I can now, sitting on a tram and make a kind of a script, and I would have a Zaha Hadid building in its representation, but also because the parametric design went into artificial intelligence. So I think this kind of form spectacle is now possible for everybody, and it will also lead to that kind of disappearance of that kind of figure. But the other thing, what we were talking about, which was this arising of what is in a world where artificial intelligence can create forms, the role of architects, of entrepreneurship. I think it was interesting for a company then to think, what can I put on the market if artificial intelligence, together with machines, can create every possible desirable object? How can I create an object which is culturally valuable? No? So also that was also, in a certain way, also Aldo Rossi's response was that you make something So he, by himself, describes it in that he can just draw like a muratore, like the one which was making the bricks, and then he became famous with his drawings, and these drawings were then something which could become an Alessi object, etc. And I think that's really, really interesting, but I think it's a highly complex of culture production, which is completely human. I mean, in terms of we are able to define something as valuable throughout a lot of cultural processes and discourse. But I think that what we are facing right now is exactly this changement of the role of that what is valuable, relevant for a society, and I think certain things are also disappearing, and people are laughing about them like clowns if they behave like that, and just a certain kind, I think there will be an emergence of a new relevance of that what is architecture, but again, it has also to do with a different kind of clients. Right now, the world in certain parts is burning, and we need homes, we need other kind of representation. I think that's also interesting that there's a rising of people which are then making more houses, which becomes interesting, etc. But it's all related, obviously, and that was he said before, in contexts and in our way to speak about things and to give it value, and is that what we call culture and fashion design. So the object we are speaking about in terms of material is that what is glass, masses. It's just because we talk about them, it became different. But I think also the next question for me would be, what does it mean to be an Italian architect? Or are we going in a European way that we are, that after, in 30 years maybe we speak more about European architecture in a relation to a global questioning, etc. I think we are now coming in really difficult kind of questions. But very interesting moment where we can question exactly this: what are identities, what is a difference, etc. And obviously, coming from, I've been educated. I had the luck to be grown up in South Tyrol in 2 languages, no. But if you look at the German culture or German language, and then also if you look at Austrian language or Austrian philosophy, which is much more critical, has much more paradoxes than a Hegelian philosophy, etc. But as a matter of fact, there is no design show in Berlin which comes out from a real market. So it's not that. There was a logic why Bauhaus became important in the German culture, because it was an explainable design. I think it would be completely impossible to have a Scotta's career in a German context in that years, which makes anti-design, because before you have to have a culture which recognizes design as a tool of communication or fashion. No? So we have cultures where objects or Oberfläche are seen as Oberflächlichkeiten. How can I say? That surfaces are potentially trivial and dangerous. Then Carlos Carper and also Hoffman would respond, the depth of something, maybe you see it on the surface. But I think it's a really, so that's what you say, Alessi is a company which would be impossible in Austria or in Germany in the 70s and the 80s, because there would be no market. And also Fendi would be completely impossible in Germany. So that right now, I think it was very interesting, if you look at money development in Milan, no? In the 70s, 60s, Falk family steel. Then the rising up slowly of propaganda machineries, Berlusconi, and all the editors. And then Miuccia Prada, Armani, and how is it called? The ones which are making Luxottica, and then chocolates, no? Ferrero. And I think that in all these kind of things, you see a development. And in all these kind of nations, if you compare them, you see a certain kind of pattern of culture, which is interesting. And I think it's an intriguing question what we are rising up. What is design? In what kind of context can it emerge? It's like if you look at universal genies, no? Universal, I mean, if you look at German culture, would have Leibniz, which is a mixture between a very technical approach. You wouldn't say Goethe. Goethe was just a bridge between the two worlds. But it's interesting that in Italy you would look at Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo Galilei, And in a normal, in a more bourgeois way, not bourgeois way, but so Leonardo Vinci is very hard to copy. You would look at Leon Battisti Alberti, no? The universal man described by Nietzsche and by Burckhardt as the goal to achieve. But also there, in different cultures, these figures wouldn't have any meaning. I think to Galileo Galilei it's important because he took reality into the context of mathematical equation and put the experiment in it. Leonardo da Vinci, the description of the world just also by matter, by drawings, by interpretation. And again, in a certain kind of culture, the universalgenie is the mathematician, the one which is able to create with words things. So there are completely different kind of cultural approaches. And I think these questions are fundamental to understand why in certain nations certain kind of industries emerge, because there's a real market, and whereas in others not. And I think this is still a European question. How do we, in a growing entity, create this kind of phenomena of national phenomena, or is it dissolving, or it becomes regional or cross-border things? I don't know what is your issue about it, but I think this question it's interesting also. Where does the border stops also for cultural representation? Do we have other questions?
Do you think that we will ever have IKEA-like houses that are pleasant to the eye, that are useful, that are affordable, that are simple? IKEA-like, IKEA.
I buy at the IKEA. Well, if you mean that the concept of IKEA house to buy and build a house, a cheap house, well, then you know for sure that, especially in Austria and Germany, but mostly in Austria, there was a movement of the Sonne Lufthaus für alle, where there was many architects of the Bauhaus that were planning prefabricated small minimal houses, the minimal building that you could build in the neighborhood, in the surroundings. So it's and this movement especially came from I would say from Austria and Germany. So now that IKEA is proposing this kind of houses, it's nothing new, and I think that there is an issue of maybe more outside of Europe of the building of houses, especially in places that have been affected of the war, for emergency houses, so-called emergency houses, or cheap housing that could give a roof to the people. So I think this aspect of developing an industry of prefabricated, well-designed houses, it's something very interesting. We are going with some projects in this direction. The Americans invented this word, which is DFMA, which sounds very nice. It's prefabrication, because prefabrication is something that always sounds like Plattenbau, but DFMA, it's designed for it's prefabrication, and it's the idea of prefabrication that you can build with sustainable materials, and in 10, 20 years, when you need to transform the building, to change the building, you can demounting without demolishing. So, to answering back to your question, I think yes, this philosophy is right. IKEA or somebody else is doing this philosophy is right. We have also to think to build something that is sustainable not only when we build it, but also after the so-called life cycle period of the building.
But I would ask you what you mean with an IKEA house, because if you're related to an object,
No, I was thinking of houses as they are. For example, whenever I go to IKEA, I see beautifully designed cutlery or anything else like objects. I like to see them. They are affordable. They are for everyone. So I was thinking about why not having houses like that? Why not just getting the house at IKEA, building up yourself?
I think there's a reason why we haven't seen an IKEA house right now. And I think that's really interesting because there's a difference between an object, which you can do it yourself, and the consequences of single homes. I think, prefabrication, yes, prefabrication is the absolute future. If you want to change the world, you have to go into scaling. If everybody of us, we are making homes together and we are buying the stuff in a mass, it becomes much cheaper. But I think the consequence, if you see IKEA as the single object of desire, my home, my family, is exactly the keystone of that what created this gigantic suburbanization. So right now, the single house, which is upper kind of land, everybody of us has to buy the streets to go there. Everybody of us has to buy the water which is going there, has gigantic consequences, and obviously it transforms us. I mean, in America, there was this vision of Frank Lloyd Wright, which was this one broad acre city, one family, 1 acre, and the complete suburbanization. But obviously, if you look at that, what we have seen before, the European cities were a product of bringing together on a small spot a lot of people, and by doing so, this kind of overlapping of functions created the city, and not just the city, created us as citizens. If I live in with my, I think that the problem is just the consequence of my single home. If I can buy it, yes, I have to build it in a plot, but all the others have also plots. So we are 100,000 which put our plots together. So that means from going from here to the other plot, we need a car, and it creates gigantic consequences. And I think to have homes where you're inside, you can do whatever you want. I mean, if I statically can give you a box where you could fulfill all your imagination, it's a different thing than to put 100,000 of single dreams of society. No, it's not a society, a single dreams of me or family into as a result. And I think the interesting thing about a city is to bring together a lot of different entities in such a way that without knowing, we become citizens. We go to the streets, we have an overlapping of function, we just walk, we see persons. And I think if we go to prefabrication, yes, we can build cities very fast, and also that they don't look dull because we have all the machines in the world to create variation. But no, in my opinion, all the problems of the world have exactly to do with that. Suburbanization, which is the consequence, my little dream, which will never create a society, which creates a society. And I think the little dream can also be fulfilled in a city if I give if I give you this space and I make it very cheap, and you could fulfill your life in here, and I give you even a plot of green, which you build in your houses, that the green is on the roof. But we have the streets of communication, we can walk to meet each other, we have a density, and we don't create too much destruction of nature. I think it's a different approach, which will be much more the direction where the future has to go, because if not, we are consuming so much land for just individual misorganization of space. The expression is not the problem, but I think the problem is the misorganization of space.
Maybe if I can add that the idea of the single IKEA house is not taking into consideration what I think is the most important thing, is when you put 2-3 houses together, you start to create an open space, a community. So just to the point that what is probably missing there is the idea that architecture is not necessarily about building a building. I always say architecture is about the space, the open space, the public space between buildings. This is for me the architecture in a way. Of course, then in the building people are living, are spending the time, are working, but the most important thing from my point of view, and what we also are trying to do in every project, is to create the social aspect in any environment. Also by creating a complex of small houses where you have a village or where you have a community with the public spaces, with places where people at the end interact, rather than have this sprawl, which is the American failure of area of small houses where you have your house, your land, your ground, your sign with stay out, beware armed. We are armed, and I think also this is the big heritage we have in Europe, that we experiment the idea of building cities as a place for a good life, and that we have to now bring it further again.
So thank you very much, Francesco, and thank you, Michael, for such an inspiring talk. I think we covered almost everything between the Medici and IKEA. But for the moment, I would suggest that this is all we have time for, and so I would suggest to wrap it up for now, and maybe keep chatting over a glass of wine and some food in the other rooms of the Institute. Thank you very much once again. Thank you very much to you all for coming, and have a lovely evening.